I'm here. I'm Graham Murphy, G. Mickey Murphy, um, from joining from Rupanuga Vedic College, the Hare Krishna Temple in Kansas City, presided over by His Holiness Dhanavir Goswami Maharaj. Talking to Madhavendra Puri Prabhu, um, the co-author of Big Bang and the Sages, and has been recently uh, pervading his theories on the conclusions drawn of deterministic evolution, the data he's collected about the S1 opsin protein evolution in humans and other mammalian species. So um, that's just a brief introduction for you. I myself am just have a humble bachelor's degree in environmental science and an elementary knowledge of the Bhagavatam. I'd like to just quickly invite you to summarize your current thesis work you're doing on the S1 Opsin. Um, I saw your last video. I thought it was the most succinct presentation of that information so far. And so, yeah, I'm interested in hearing for the audience's sake, just kind of like a brief description of that research and the conclusions of it.
Scientists have studied in great detail what's called the S1 opsin. It's a protein molecule in the primate retina that mediates the perception of blue light. You probably know there are three different cone cells, red, green, and blue. So in each cone cell, there's an opsin. It's a protein molecule, and it receives light. It picks up light at a certain frequency and sends information to the brain, which ultimately allows you to see different colors. The evolution of these protein molecules has been studied in great detail. Hundreds of papers have been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. And everything I cite in my write-up, my article on this, is based on peer-reviewed scientific knowledge. So what has been ascertained is there was a particular phase of the evolution that went from 90 to 75 million years ago. And that phase of the evolution involved 3 amino acid substitutions in this S1 opsin. None of these amino acid substitutions individually produced any fitness advantage. That's the key point. Only when all 3 had accumulated together in a group was there a fitness advantage in the S1 opsin, namely a shift in the spectral peak from 360 nanometers to 380 nanometers. Again, the function of this S1 opsin is to pick up light. And according to which amino acids are in which positions of the protein, it is sensitive to different frequencies of light. So this particular evolutionary phase from 90 to 75 million years ago shifted the spectral peak, the response, the maximum sensitivity of this S1 opsin from 360 nanometers to 380 nanometers. And that shift in spectral peak allowed the retina to start picking up a new set of frequencies. So that conferred a fitness advantage. But only when all 3 of these amino acid substitutions had accumulated. And the science of population genetics allows you to calculate how long it would take for these 3 amino acid substitutions to accumulate in the S1 opsin. And these are standard equations. This is all peer-reviewed mainstream evolutionary biology. I give all the references in my journal article. So I do the calculation, which is just plugging in numbers into their equations. Nothing I invented myself. These are standard equations of population genetics. So when you plug in the numbers, you get 190 billion years. That's how long it would take for the three amino acid substitutions to accumulate in the S1 opsin. Now, the fossil record shows that that only took 15 million years, this phase of the evolution that I'm talking about. And the fossil record represents or imposes an absolute time constraint on all impersonal theories of evolution. So the mainstream scientific conception of evolution is impersonal. It deals with physical events only, no guided intelligence, no personality involved, no one with a plan or a will or a sentient being who has an intention to create things over time. All of the factors of modern science for evolution are impersonal. For example, if you ask what a mutation is in modern science, a genetic mutation, that is there's a molecule called the polymerase that copies the DNA, routine copying of DNA. And when the polymerase makes a rare mistake, it's quite an efficient molecule. It only makes a 1 out of a billion mistakes. Whenever it copies the DNA, it puts in the wrong nucleotide into the sequence, only 1 out of a billion times, which is a very excellent machine. It does it. And those mistakes in the DNA, the routine copying errors that are not corrected by the proofreading mechanism that accompanies the polymerase, those become mutations that are fixed in your genome or your DNA. Typically speaking, every human being has about 100 new mutations that were not present in his parents. So mutations are a common event. The rates are given, as I mentioned. It's not so common. It's quite efficient, the polymerase. But because there are 3 billion nucleotides in the human genome, if you have a rate of 10 to the minus 9, then you've got 3 mistakes per genome. For human beings, the mutation rate is a little higher. It's about 1 out of 100 million. So you have about roughly 30 new mutations. Some people calculate 100. It varies a little bit. The point is, mutations are a well-established and common phenomenon in modern science. But the mutations of modern science have no plan behind them. They're called impersonal, physical events.
If
So
I may interject quickly, if I may interject, just for the benefit of the audience, uh, we're co-religionists, the two of us, in a sect of what you could maybe call Hinduism, called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, or Hare Krishna, as it's colloquially known. And a common distinction in our religion that we make uh, of different types of philosophies is that some are what we call personal, in that they acknowledge the individual existence of divine person who's in charge of the universe, and as opposed to a universe which is guided um,
physical
by
laws only.
physical laws or a spiritual essence that is not embodied in a supreme person or individual souls. So I just wanted to quickly, for the audience's benefit, draw that distinction without meaning to derail you.
Modern science does not recognize anything spiritual. It's all physical.
Right.
All physical events operating according to the laws of physics and chemistry. Like I mentioned, this polymerase, how mutations work in modern science. It's just a machine. These are molecular machines. Protein
Yeah.
molecules are molecular machines. So there's no personality involved. There's no conscious agent with will and mind and senses and a desire to create a certain phenomenon, create certain species of life. That's not accepted in modern science today. That was accepted as the standard worldview of human beings around the world for thousands of years. So modern science has introduced a radical new concept that we are a grand series of accidents because there's nothing personal about this, the way mutations come into play, as I mentioned. We're, we happen to be a series of accidents. We, butterflies, caterpillars, scorpions, everything, all life forms, are simply a grand series of accidents operating according to impersonal laws. But we need to analyze this closer, and there's a science called population genetics that allows you to calculate how long it would take for a grand series of accidents. That's what I've done. And that's 190 billion years. Obviously, that's longer than the age of the Earth. Any evolutionary process that requires more time than the age of the Earth must be false because you obviously only have the age of the Earth. There's a hard time constraint, the constraint given by the fossil record. And in fact, it's much worse than the age of the Earth in this case, because scientists have reconstructed in great detail the evolution of that S1 Opsin. I mentioned it occurred between 90 and 75 million years. So you only have 15 million years. And according to population genetics, it should have taken 190 billion years. That's 4 orders of magnitude greater. That falsifies the impersonal approach to evolution and proves that it was done under deliberate design by a person. So that's the essence of my work.
Thank you for summarizing that quickly. And yeah, like you mentioned, these are well-established formulas that population scientists use in evolutionary biology to discuss the changes in gene expression over a group over time, or in a group over time, excuse me. While this whole thing could be potentially falsified by poking holes in those formulas are well established, and
There's
that
nothing wrong.
that
Sorry, there's nothing wrong with the formulas.
right.
We're not poking holes in those formulas. This is mainstream
I'm
evolutionary biology. What the formulas show is that
yeah,
evolution should have taken 10,000 times longer than it did take.
yeah,
The fossil record shows how long it actually did take. That's 15 million years in this case.
right,
But
right,
according to population genetics, it should have taken 190 billion years. Both are correct. The fossil record is correct, and population genetics formulas are correct. And what they show is that the 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 operation of evolution was not
there,
impersonal. That's what it shows, because the formulas of population genetics show how long it would take for impersonal evolution. That's 190 billion years. That's what the formulas of population genetics show. It should have taken 190 billion years. And the fossil record shows how long it actually took, which is only 15 million years. That's 10,000 times difference, 4 orders of magnitude. That's a large discrepancy. And it's not that the equations of population genetics are wrong. That's not true. And it's not that the fossil records both are correct. What they show is that the mechanism of evolution
right,
is not what people have expected it to be. That's what this shows.
yes,
The mechanism,
right. Yeah, like I was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
the mechanism has been assumed by biologists for a century to be impersonal. This analysis I've just given proves that the mechanism of evolution was personal. There was a person with will, mind, and intelligence and senses and the intention to create a conscious entity who wanted to create certain life forms. So that's what this shows.
That's a fascinating conclusion, I think, that is worth diving into more, both from the scientific and scriptural perspectives. And like we said, the dating methods are solid, well established, and cross-referencing each other through confirming details in the fossil and geological records. And these population density or population study formulas are also confirmed through many different examples of their useful application in understanding the changes in gene expression in populations over time. So yeah, that leads ultimately to your conclusion that it's this direction and mechanism of evolution that is in question. And naturally, with what we know from having been exposed to Puranic literature, which for the audience's benefit, Puranic literature is a category of what you might call Hindu scripture, which relates to histories that was committed to writing in the medieval times. And for us Hare Krishnas, the most important of these is the Bhagavat Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam, which has an extensive history given of the universe, as well as some future events. But we'll revisit all that in this talk. Um, Now, there's just a couple sort of like, if you don't mind indulging me on just a couple questions I have about this particular study of the S1 Opsin gene. Just kind of like a light question here, no pun intended, is so you're talking about these three neutral mutations that together add up to a mutation that affects our fitness. That is, it gives us the ability to see blue light. Individually, they don't give us the ability to see blue light, but each successive mutation adds up to that ability.
Um,
And
I would I would state it a little differently.
okay,
Each mutation, which is actually an amino acid substitution,
right,
does nothing individually. Only when
right,
all
right,
three have accumulated in the
yeah,
S1 opsin is there a new fitness advantage, namely seeing blue light.
right, right,
So all three
and
have to accumulate. That takes time. The
yeah,
formulas of population genetics allow you to calculate how long that would take.
right, right,
And that's
because of the jargon.
that's
Oh,
190 billion years. Whereas
yeah,
the fossil record is very clear. It gives only 15 million years.
yeah, yeah.
So the combination of the fossil record plus population genetics allows you to identify that personal evolution was involved and that impersonal evolution is ruled out.
And just for those of you in the audience who may not be as familiar with the mechanisms of natural selection, these mutations are said to be selected for over a series of generations because they provide some fitness advantage, and the individuals containing those genes and the expressions of those genes leading to a different physicality causes them to survive and reproduce at a higher rate, which leads to more prevalence of that in the population as a whole. And over time, that's how evolution occurs according to natural selection. In this case, this ability to see blue light is obviously an advantage. We've gone over the fact that the three mutations that accumulate to that ability are neutral and thus wouldn't necessarily be selected for with the same speed because they don't provide that survival advantage. But my curious question that I really couldn't help but ask is, you had mentioned in your previous videos that prior to adapting this ability to see blue light, humans actually saw UV light. And I just don't understand personally I can understand the advantage of gaining the ability to see blue light, but I don't understand the advantage of losing the ability to see ultraviolet light. Have your studies shed any light, no pun intended again, on that particular aspect of this? This is just a curiosity of mine.
The ability to see UV light has some selective advantage also. And for different organisms in different environments, there is some fitness advantage to being able to see UV light. But that's not the fitness advantage that occurred after the three amino acids substitutions had accumulated. That particular fitness advantage that was conferred by the accumulation of the three mutations was the fitness advantage of seeing blue light in our ancestors, primate ancestors that lived between 90 and 75 million years ago.
Was there any evolutionary mechanism driving our ability or our losing the ability to perceive UV light, or was that just a side effect of this protein shift?
There are advantages to not having UV light in the eye because UV is a higher energy. It actually damages the retina gradually. So
Oh,
that factor was also there.
oh, so there's maybe a protective aspect to these
Yeah.
mutations where they helped defend the internal workings of our eye against the radiation from the sun.
Not these three. What protected the eye was that the lens of the eye became opaque to UV radiation, along with the evolution of blue light vision. These are two independent things that happened.
Oh, I see. So they're two sequences of mutations that happen simultaneously, independent of one another.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, okay. I see. Well, that clears that up. I was just curious about that. Um,
But
and so,
some organisms, like birds, retain the ability to see UV radiation. It does have some benefits. You can see certain colors that you can't see if you only see in the visible spectrum, what the human eye calls the visible spectrum. So
right,
there are some organisms that do retain an S1 with UV sensitivity. There are some organisms, certain fish, certain birds. Evolution works according to a particular environment. In certain environments, it's beneficial to see UV radiation. And
right.
and the bad effects of damaging the retina are less um, problematic than the good benefits of being able to see UV radiation for some organisms in certain environments. Evolution is highly complex, very complex.
Humans are long-lived, so I guess we want to protect those retinas.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's another point. If the creature organism only lives for a few years, it wouldn't matter whether UV radiation is there or not because it takes 10, 20, 30 years of gradual degradation of the retina over a long
right,
period of time. But if these are short-lived organisms, and if they reproduce before, see, at reproductive age may be much younger anyway, before the retina can be degraded. Those are other factors. But those are irrelevant to the point I'm making.
right. Just a curiosity.
Yeah. You can read a lot. If you like science, there's endless reading to be done. You
Oh yeah.
just go on Google, just use AI and type in S1 Opsin. You'll get tons more than you can read in 50 years if you read 10 hours a day.
But if you don't mind indulging just one more curious question on this point. Earlier you mentioned that the human mutation rate per generation is higher on average than that of other species by a factor of 10.
That's correct.
Um, what do you know anything about the cause of that? Or do you have
Yeah,
any ideas about that?
the human generation time is much longer.
Oh, so our long lifespan.
Yeah, a long lifespan and generation time. Human generation is 25 or 30 years.
Hmm. So has that slower rate of generation time is the way you phrased it, the slower rate of generation time or sexual reproduction, has that selected for us to have more mutations per generation in order to make up for that slower evolutionary rate as
Yes.
opposed to other species which reproduce like, you know, gnats or tadpoles, for example, have hundreds of offspring at once and die within a matter of weeks.
Yeah,
That's
the generation time influences that, the rate, the mutation rate. For the mammals that lived between 90 and 75 million years ago had a generation of 1 year, whereas we human beings have a generation time that's 20 or 30 years.
yeah.
So because of a longer generation time, then there has to be a higher mutation rate per generation. The mutation rate per year is about the same.
Well, that's fascinating. And yeah, and time and lifespans are a topic that will most likely be revisiting several times throughout this talk, as we go into discussions of how the accounts of our universe's history in the Srimad Bhagavatam compare to the accounts given in the mainstream scientific consensus. Quickly, you've touched on um, you've touched on the implications of uh, this um, discrepancy in the expected time versus the actual time that it took to make this adaptation, and its implications on um, evolution and our view of it being either natural or, like you said, or natural, like you said, impersonal or deterministic. When the conclusion you came to from a deterministic view of evolution is that it's guided by an intelligent, powerful personality. So you've quickly gone over these implications.
Deterministic is the wrong word. Natural selection is deterministic. It's
Oh,
yeah, I'm sorry. So that people don't get confused, I have to correct this.
please, yeah.
It's not, we're not talking about indeterministic versus deterministic. We're talking about impersonal versus personal as the mechanism of evolution. Natural selection is deterministic,
Yeah.
but it's impersonal.
So to expound on that point a little bit, the Srimad Bhagavatam, its personal history of how life gets distributed from the universe, throughout the universe, is via a series of what are called progenitors or Prajapatis in the original Sanskrit. This 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 looks like, ultimately, you could say, God creating a creator God who is the ultimate progenitor of our universe, who then reproduces to create various other progenitors who are responsible for populating the different regions of the universe. I couldn't help but think of Star Trek in this light because when you mentioned that this evolution was designed with a predetermined outcome in mind by an intelligent person. You watch a show like Star Trek, those of you may be familiar with it, you see the wide and almost ubiquitous distribution of humanoid species across the universe. Um, if it were like a random scenario, you'd have all kinds of grotesque and highly alien creatures emerging from the different situations on their planets, with who knows how many arms and bones on the outside, organs on the outside, just different things, rather than these you know humanoid, more easily comprehensible entities. In the show, that was a purposeful outcome, um, where a race of humanoid progenitors in the distant past seeded life on the different planets to eventually emerge with that outcome. And while the account given in the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, might be a little different, I think it's a good analogy for the kind of worldview we're looking at here, where there's an ordered structure of evolution that favors particular outcomes based on design. I just want to, and oh, is that on your end or my end? That's on my end. Sorry. Um, Hold on, let me silence that really quick. Can you hear that ringtone?
Nope.
Oh, you can't? All right. Well, I'll just let it ring then and try and focus. Um, I just wanted to invite you to expound on that idea quickly of um, of what it means for life to be designed with a predetermined outcome in mind, with the mechanisms of evolution in play that we are familiar with, because you're not arguing against evolution here.
No.
You-
Evolution is proven by the fossil record.
right.
The question is whether it's impersonal evolution or personal evolution.
Right.
Personal evolution means a person with a conscious agent who has an intention to create certain species. That's what we mean by personal evolution. And that's what my argument shows is actually the case for the S1 Opsin. There was personal control. There was a person who wanted to create and implemented a design through the process of evolution, personal evolution. What we're talking about, the difference between deliberate design and no design at all.
Deliberate design and no design at all. Um, so yeah, I'm very interested in hearing because this isn't like a Genesis style creationism that you're proposing. And it also seems to differ a little bit from the process of progenation as described in the Bhagavatam. And quickly, that's accounted for by, and I definitely want to revisit this later, accounted for by the fact that the Srimad Bhagavatam is describing the history of the universe through an alternate Earth called Mandala that exists in a higher dimensional state. In that universe, the history given, or not in that same universe, but in that higher dimensional place, the history given of the progenation of life on Earth is through a direct sexual lineage where the progenitors give birth to other people who descend over time and that way populate the earth. But it's clear that we can't be talking about that exact same process when it comes to our earth, because the fossil record shows that gradual the gradual procession of life from single cellular organisms, slightly more complex organisms, eventually leading to vertebrates, etc., so on. There's many mass extinctions in the middle until our current time where we're sitting here today. Um, so I think it's implied that the progenitors or whatever designer was responsible for managing this evolutionary process had to have done it through designing those molecules of life, which I think is something you touched on in your past video. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about what you think about that process.
The designer has several mechanisms at his disposal. One is consider the asteroid that destroyed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. By,
Yeah,
by doing that, the entire trajectory of evolution was altered.
right.
So he can do it through natural events like asteroids, through volcanic eruptions, through earthquakes, or by direct manipulation of the genome itself, hitting the right nucleotides at the right times. So a deliberate designer has several options at his disposal.
So you're proposing it could be intercession in the process of evolution in order to change the proteins at the right times in order to cause the genetic changes, or rather than some kind of winding up of the genetic clock at the very beginning to design a genetic machine that will unfold a certain way over time.
Yeah, the concept of designing a set of molecules in the very beginning and then letting them run by themselves is not supported by the fossil record. The fossil record shows uh, um, mass extinctions at certain times. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
The one I just mentioned is the most famous one that occurred 66 million years ago. An asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula and wiped out all the dinosaurs. Prior to that time, mammals were very small creatures, mainly the size of rats, and they had to avoid the dinosaurs because the dinosaurs were big and powerful. But with the removal of the dinosaurs, those small rat-like mammals radiated into various forms like lions, elephants, giraffes, cows, horses. That's that's the Cenozoic radiation of mammals starting 66 million years ago. That's documented by the fossil record. So the a designer has several options at his command. He could do it in various ways, but the fossil record it seems to suggest that the way he did it was by controlling the environment along with hitting certain nucleotides along the way at certain times.
Yeah. Yeah. I
We
could
have, we
see.
have no information about how he actually did it. We are speculating now based
Of
on
course.
based on paleontology and molecular genetics. We can make some educated guesses, but we have no idea because the description given in the Bhagavatam does not pertain to the earth we live on, rather pertains to the higher dimensional alternative world called Bhumandala. So
Right.
we have no information on how design on our Earth was actually implemented, the mechanisms used. We have no information. We have clear information about how it was done on Bhumandala, but those are things we can never verify with our physical senses. The sixth canto, chapter 6, Srimad Bhagavatam, describes how the various daughters of Daksha took certain forms, like one daughter of Daksha took a form of a snake, transformed her body into a snake and produced all the snakes. Another daughter of Daksha transformed her body into that of a horse and produced all the horses, zebras, and horse like creatures. Another with lions, another with birds. That process is obviously completely alien to the way it happened on the earth we perceive. So we don't have any information about that, what's relevant to our earth planet. So we have to make educated guesses, as I mentioned.
Right, right. And in contrast to in Bhumandala, where the scriptural evidence is very clear, we are completely reliant on our material senses to reconstruct the history of our own planet, which is quite a situation to be in. Just quickly, you said that was in Canto 6?
Chapter 6 of Canto 6. It's easy to remember.
Yeah, it is. I definitely want to revisit that later. Or I mean, research that independently. But speaking of Daksha, I actually wanted to talk about Daksha, and we happen to be on this topic of mass extinctions. Um, One of the most fascinating parts of your book, I read your entire book last night. Um, it was a trip. But one of the most fascinating parts to me was when you were talking about, and this gets into the weeds a little bit, so let me introduce for the audience's purposes, that in the Puranic concept of time, time moves in cycles rather than being a linear progression. And there's various different types of cycles listed. One such type of cycle is called a manvatara, which is the amount of time that a manu or a progenitor of the human race in a certain era lives. Um, so, um, so there have been, from my understanding, seven manvataras since the last time the universe was destroyed and created.
There
Uh,
are, there are 14 manvantaras. That's the correct pronunciation. Man,
Thank you,
manvantara. 14
Manvantara.
manvantaras in a day of Brahma. Day of Brahma is 4.32 billion years. We're in the seventh right now. We're in the 28th Chatu Yuga of the seventh manvantara called Vaivasvata Manvantara.
Right, right. And again, for the benefit of the audience, a Chatur Yuga is a smaller cyclical unit of time that exists within a Manvantara. And a day of Brahma is a larger unit of time that contains, it's cyclical, that contains multiple Manvantaras. At the end of every day of Brahma, there is a devastation event where many of the planets are destroyed and then recreated. So since the last time that happened on Bhumandala, again, we're talking about Bhumandala, the higher parallel Earth, not our own Earth. There have been seven of these Manvantara cycles where humanity has been redistributed throughout Bhumandala. Um,
Um, I,
and
I, I would not use the word redistributed. At the
okay,
at the end of each manvantara, there's a pralaya or mass extinction.
right,
The word devastation is unclear. That's a devotee word we use in devotee talk, but other people won't understand what a devastation means.
right.
It's called a mass extinction, or in Sanskrit, a pralaya.
A
At the,
prolite,
at the end of each manvantara, there's a pralaya
right,
in which all humans, plants, and animals are destroyed, but they're immediately recreated the same as before. So the Puranic fossil record would be entirely homogeneous, meaning that the kind of life forms that are present at any one time are present at all times throughout the day of Brahma. That's a homogeneous fossil record on Bhumandala. The fossil record on the Earth we live on is totally non-homogeneous. It starts out with single-celled organisms.
right,
Looks, in fact, for 3 billion years, you've got single-celled organisms on Earth, the Precambrian.
right,
And then towards the end of the Precambrian, around 800 million years ago, you start to get worm-like creatures. And
right,
then the Cambrian starts 540 million years ago. You get trilobites and various other creatures, more advanced. At each stage, like the next is Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian. This is the geological epochs. At each
yeah,
stage, you find a general trend towards more complex organisms. That's not what you find on Bhumandala. They're always the same organisms. They're periodically destroyed and recreated very quickly within a few million years. So if you examine the fossil record on Bhumandala, it would be entirely homogeneous, which means the kind of living entities living at any one time are the same as the living entities that live at all other times. That's called a homogeneous fossil record.
and that for reference, that's kind of not exactly, but it's sort of more similar to that Genesis style creation where all the animals that are living were made in the beginning and last the whole duration of the creation. I know there's some differences between the biblical account and the Puranic account, but it's more similar than the situation we have here on Earth, where there's a gradual progression of organisms in very, very many forms that get exterminated at various times. But so you mentioned these geological epochs and the mass extinctions that punctuate them. Uh, and the book, Big Bang and the Sages, um, there was a tight correlation between the Manvantaras and these pralaya, these real life Earth extinction events that punctuated our own evolution and caused changes in the direction of the changes in these organisms over time. So and quickly, without getting too into the calculations of how that time on Bhumandala correlates to time on Earth. That is a topic I think we should explore, but just for the purpose of this conversation, um, there's there is a progenitor, the most prominent progenitor in the Srimad Bhagavatam. His name is Daksha. He's the progenitor of the progenitors in a sense. And he's given the chief authority over distributing life on Bhumandala. Um, and in in Big Bang and the Sages, you account for a large gap in speciation events on Earth. For reference, it was about just short of 4 billion years ago that that conditions on Earth became favorable for the development of life and the first single-celled organisms and before that, the first, what would you call them? The like protocells, protocells using RNA instead of DNA. Those types of proto-organisms emerged at that time. And then for like almost 3 billion years, there was very little change, very little speciation until the Cambrian explosion, when all kinds of different organisms emerged in the ocean, and that a couple mass extinctions later led to the situation we have now. So, in your book, The Big Bang and the Sages, you relate those changes in the geological conditions and biological conditions of Earth to the seven Manvantaras, excuse me. Um, and well, and that relating to the life of Daksha and the story of Daksha given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, I wanted to invite you to tell the details of that.
But the first point I want to make to clarify what you said, there's a temporal correlation between events on Bhumandala and events on the Earth that we perceive
Yeah,
with our senses. There's a temporal correlation in terms of mass extinctions and other events, but the kind of creatures that were living at certain times are totally different on Bhumandala than on Earth, the Earth we perceive. That must
yeah,
be completely clear about that.
right.
And the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam describes how Daksha offended Lord Shiva. This was during the Swayambhuva Manvantara, the first Manvantara, 4 billion years ago, starting 4 billion years ago. Daksha offended Lord Shiva and was killed for his offense. And he did not regain a physical body until the sixth Manvantara, when he became the offspring of the Prachetas. That's in the sixth Manvantara. So that long period of time, which translates into 3 or more than 3 billion years, correlates very nicely, because that's why evolution on our planet slowed down so much. There were only single-celled organisms until 800 million years ago. That's a little earlier than the Cambrian, just to be technical about it. And actually, what you have is, according to modern science, you have single-celled organisms like bacteria, prokaryotes. A prokaryote means it has no nucleus. It's a simple cell. You have prokaryotes from about 3.5 billion years ago down to about 2 billion years ago when eukaryotic organisms came into existence. Those are more complex. They're still single-celled organisms, but they're more complicated because they have a nucleus and a bunch of other internal cellular organs. And then these eukaryotic single-celled organisms, like yeast cells, existed from around 2 billion down to about 800 million years ago when multicellular organisms first came into existence, like worms. So you have worm-like creatures until the Ediacaran, when you have around 570 million years ago, you have a bunch of very bizarre creatures that are unlike any life forms on Earth today. They are multicellular organisms, but they're unlike anything we know of. And those existed from 570 down to 540. Around 540, that's the beginning of the Cambrian, when you start to have recognizable organisms like trilobites. They're like crabs.
Right.
That's in the Cambrian period from 540, 540 million years ago down to about 490 million years ago when the Ordovician began. And then you have
Hmm.
fish, the first appearance of jawless fish in the fossil record. So fish developed jaws and became a little more complex throughout the Ordovician, then the Silurian and the Devonian. At the end of the Devonian, you have the first tetrapods. That means creatures with four limbs that came onto land at the end of the Devonian period. That's about 370 million years ago. And throughout the Carboniferous, you have a wide range of tetrapods, which are giant lizards in the Carboniferous period. Then after the Carboniferous is the Permian period, where you have more evolved lizards. Then at the end of the Permian, you have Earth's greatest mass extinction, the end
Right.
Permian mass extinction, which wiped out the majority of creatures, but left a few lizard-like creatures to survive. And then in the
The great,
Triassic, the
the great
Triassic,
dying, right? Great dying.
I don't understand.
The great dying.
Yeah, you can call it that. So after the Permian mass extinction, some living entities did survive. Certain kinds of very durable lizards survived. And in the middle of the Triassic, they became dinosaurs. So Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, from 250 down to 66 million, is the era of the dinosaurs. That's a long period of time. They lasted for a very long period of time, almost around 200 million years. That's much more successful than any other creatures, like mammals or humans, don't have, so far, have not shown that kind of durability. So at the end of the Cretaceous period, the asteroid struck the Yucatan, wiped out all the dinosaurs. The rat-like mammals then radiated into larger forms, and that's the Cenozoic, which is the Paleocene, the Eocene, the Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene, Pleistocene, and the Holocene, which is the modern era. So that's what we find on Earth, the fossil record of the Earth we live on, not Bhumandala, which is a parallel world with a totally different fossil record.
Right, right. But all this incredible and diverse evolutionary action that you just detailed correlates, given the time differentiation, the time correlation between Earth and Bhumandala, it all correlates to just the sixth and seventh Manvantara on Bhumandala when Daksha was reborn. So he had a huge hiatus. There's some dark humor in it to me, where, he just got started generating life on Bhumandala. And on Earth, I guess that correlates to the beginning of single-celled organisms. And that situation remains static for like the vast span of evolutionary time. While Daksha was, I'm kind of unclear about his death. I was thinking that he had a head of a goat and was living with the head of a goat for a long time, but I guess somehow he died and was reborn. But regardless of that detail, he yeah, ever since he's gotten started up again, We're booming here on Earth. And I know we're going on an hour now in our discussion. There's so many things that I want to ask and talk about. I'd
I'm
actually really enjoy
I'm happy to
follow-up
answer
discussion.
questions.
Oh yeah.
You can go as long as
Yeah.
you can go as long as you want. Ask as many questions as you want.
Well, I think for the general YouTube audience, watching a video over an hour is usually not as palatable, but we can have maybe a series of conversations where we can touch up on issues later if you're willing. Um,
Yes, I am. But if someone is seriously interested, I don't see why they wouldn't want to keep listening.
oh yeah. Yeah, just people are busy and
We're
the
talking
algorithm also
we're talking
dictate.
about we're talking about serious people here. If you want kid stuff, that's another ball game. We're
Yeah.
talking about very serious analysis of evolution, paleontology, geology, Puranic description of a higher dimensional realm. This is not cheap stuff. This is very sophisticated philosophy and science. This is
Oh
for
yeah.
serious people. It's not kid stuff. So
Oh
serious
yeah.
serious people like to study. Like I went to University of California, San Diego. You study and you learn. You spend hours and hours and days and months studying topics in detail in science. If you're
Yeah.
serious, you don't have to be serious, but if you're going to do this subject, you're going to encounter complex concepts.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I Oh, it's very complex, and there's so many complex things I've been racking my head over for the last week that I haven't even touched on yet, which is why I do have the sort of the instinct to want to cut up these talks a little bit into more bite-sized sections. But here, there's one really important question that underlies this whole thing about the difference in the process of progenation and Bhumandala versus Earth. And that is, we see there's a correlation in terms of time, in terms of the units of time that we're dealing with. It's obvious that the manifestations of that progenation of life are different. We've already talked about that. There's a huge diversity and and a progression from simplicity to variegation on Earth, and many irregular periods of mass extinction, as opposed to the hyperregularity of the cycles on Bhumandala and the consistency of the types of organisms you see there, um, as well as the process of progenation being completely different. Is there, it's a series of sexual reproductions leading to the spread of life, whereas here, there it is a series of sexual reproductions, but if you're assuming that the process is managed by some kind of intelligence or some kind of progenitors, then I don't think that they're coming down and like mating with these single cell organisms or these lizards. There's something else going on here, some sort of mechanism. And so, given the correlations but the differences, I want to know, in your personal opinion, based on all the research you've done, um, how the actions on Bhumandala affect our Earth as a reflection of that reality. And this, of course, it applies to our current talk about evolution, but it applies to a lot of other issues too that we might talk about further on down the line. But as a general principle, it's obvious that they're reflections of one another, Bhumandala and Earth. But how exactly do the things happening on Bhumandala uh, affect Earth? What's the mechanism? What's the principle in which that we're dealing with?
The mechanism is that they're both under personal control. Both the evolution on the Earth planet we live on and the periodic destruction and recreation of species on Bhumandala, both of those processes are under personal control.
So they're managed by the same intelligence.
Yeah, the Prajapatis. Ultimately, it's Krishna. Krishna gives an overall plan to various Prajapatis. Brahma is the first Prajapati, and he does not create by sexual reproduction. He does by Manasaputra. Have you heard that term? Manasaputra? He creates by his
Right.
mind. It's not
Mental birth.
it's not correct to say that the entire Puranic paradigm of creation is sexual reproduction. That's inaccurate. There are
Right, right,
various phases of the creation. The first is ideas given by Vishnu to Brahma.
right.
Vishnu or Krishna says, here's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And Brahma says, okay, I'll put it together like this. And what he does is
Beautiful.
he,
Beautiful parts of the Bhagavatam, by the way. Those are some of the most inspiring parts of the Bhagavatam to me. But didn't mean to
so
interrupt.
Brahma creates by his mind, they're called Manasaputra, various,
Right.
various Prajapatis like Daksha.
Yeah.
So he creates these great Prajapatis, and they transform their bodies. I wouldn't even call that sexual reproduction. If one of the daughters, sixth canto, chapter 6 says, one of the daughters of Daksha took the form of snake and produced all the snakes. There's not really sexual reproduction there, although it does say that Daksha was very interested in sex. So you're right.
Right.
Definitely, there was motivation, some sort of sexual motivation on the part of the Prajapatis. However, the description actually given in the Bhagavatam uh, seems entirely mystical. It doesn't follow any simple understanding of molecular biology that we have, because
Mm.
for a demigoddess to transform her body into another organism like a snake involves a kind of molecular biology we have no understanding of, absolutely no understanding of the mechanism of that. And in fact, were it not for the correlations between mass extinctions and the age of the universe and the age of the solar system, one would be entitled to dismiss the entire Srimad Bhagavatam as mythological
Yeah. Yeah.
because we have no way to verify it. Absolutely
Right.
no way. The reason I wrote the book called The Big Bang Sages is to prove that the Bhagavatam is not mythological. And the way I prove it is the age of the universe, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, is 13.82 billion years. Age of the universe, according to Hubble telescope and analysis of the cosmic microwave background radiation, is 13.80 billion. That's less than
Right.
1% difference. So,
Yeah.
the age of the solar system, according to modern science, 4.567 billion years. According to Puranas, 4.63 billion years, very close. So you go through an age of the Permian mass extinction, age of the Toarcian mass extinction, age of the and Eocene mass extinction. These all line up too well to say that to dismiss the Puranas as mythology. That's the point.
Exactly.
That's why I wrote this book called Big Bang and Sages, because it proves that the Bhagavatam is not mythology. The Bhagavatam is giving superhuman knowledge, very advanced scientific knowledge, at a time before they had a Hubble telescope. To get the age of the universe the way modern scientists did, you need rockets to blast a satellite into space, like the Hubble telescope. You need super
Yes.
sophisticated computers to analyze data. You have to analyze what's called the cosmic microwave background radiation.
Right.
And small anisotropies and isotropic blips in that cosmic microwave background radiation allow you to date the age of the universe. And science comes up with 13.80 billion years. Now, the Puranas, using something different, revelation by the higher beings who created the various species on Bhumandala, also revealed knowledge to the Brahmins of ancient India. So they revealed all this knowledge about the age of the universe and the age of the solar system and the age of the various mass extinctions. So the mechanism of finding out about these things is totally different than in modern science, which is based on empirical and scientific research. In the Puranas, it's revelation from higher beings to earthly Brahmins.
And I'd like to add to that that it's not just accurate ages and dates given by this revelation to the Brahmanas, it's also specific details about what specifically is happening at these times. For example, you mentioned the Permian extinction earlier. In your book, you go into good detail about how the different elements at play in that mass extinction on Earth, like acid rain, heavy volcanism, global warming, rising Earth temperatures, drought, changing salinity conditions in the ocean. They're all detailed in a very specific way in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, and there's other details too in the Srimad Bhagavatam of things that couldn't be known to medieval or ancient Indian scholars, like, for example, details about the development of the fetus within the womb, accounts of flying machines, and a variety of other things, like even the number of types of solar radiation given, seven. That's the same number we have to distinguish the different types of solar radiation. And so uh, there's just a vast amount of information in the Bhagavatam to attest to this idea that they're getting accurate scientific details by a process that is not um, empirically uh, and experimentally driven, like our own conception of science today. But I think that I really do want to have follow-up conversations because there's so many topics that we haven't touched on today with how detailed this particular topic is. But I think that there's a philosophical question at the end here that I'm curious to hear your take on is we have these two correlating spheres of existence. Um, that kind of operate by different rules, but have obvious correlations. Bhumandala and Earth. Um, and we've talked about some of the differences here, about how evolution works differently here than there, about how time moves differently here and there, about some of these, what you might call like mythological events we don't see evidence for in our own sky, on our own planet, but they happen there in the and the correlations in the periods of time with events on Earth are solid, despite the lack of evidence we see for, Shiva or Daksha or any of these amazing characters running around our own planet. So my question is, it's a philosophical question. Why? Why are there two different spheres of existence? If Mandala is already a functioning creation of its own, and with its own living entities playing out their own desires and karmic reactions, and this sort of playground for souls that Vishnu, God, is allowing living entities to space for. Why does there need to be a lower dimensional state and locations and living entities here in our universe that we can perceive and are familiar with that functions by different laws?
The ultimate reason why is because Krishna is very compassionate and he knows that most people will not be able to take to pure devotional service. Most people will be interested in some combination of spiritual and material advancement. So therefore, there are different realms. If you read the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, you have Bhumandala. Above Bhumandala is Svarga. Above Svarga is Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, then Vaikuntha Loka. So what Krishna is offering you is a whole bunch of different gradations from grossly materialistic all the way up to spiritual, because this is his compassion upon human beings knowing that some people want to live in this way and other people want to live on that planet, have a different combination, a ratio of spiritual to material phenomena. So Krishna arranges for the entire universal creation to have many different planets with different things going on.
Hmm. For a little bit of context, you're referring to this horizontal arrangement of planetary planes as that are parallel to Bhumandala, like this going upward and down. You have a lot of different world religions that see the cosmos this way. I think a lot of people might be familiar with Norse mythology and the different worlds in Norse mythology. A lot of people might be familiar with the Book of Enoch and the tour that Enoch received through the heavens and the different heavens he visited that were arranged. I said horizontally, I meant vertically in this similar way. Um, and that's a feature of Vedic cosmology that exists in this Bhumandala realm that we can't perceive. And taken that philosophical conclusion that God is arranging all these different realms for the different tastes of the living entities to enjoy or potentially suffer their karmic reactions. Um, but our Earth and our observable cosmos here is not a lower plane in that arrangement of Bhumandala. It seems to be a different dimensionality altogether. And we don't necessarily perceive any kind of vertical arrangement of, I think we might be cutting out. Can you hear me?
Back in now.
Oh, okay, okay. What was the last thing you heard?
We don't perceive the different realms from our standpoint.
Right, we don't have a vertical arrangement where there's a more subtle solar system above our solar system plane and a lower one below ours. So if there's an alternate, this is a follow-up question here. If there's an alternate Earth correlating to Pumandala, why don't we see alternate Patalas or hells? Why don't we see alternate Svargalokas, or maybe you could translate that to heavens? Why is that?
Ultimately, it's Krishna's arrangement. He decides how it should be run.
Yeah,
It's what it is.
who are we to know, I guess.
You can try to dismiss the Bhagavatam as fantasy, but the correlations I described in Big Bang and Sages proves that it's not fantasy. We don't perceive it. It's outside of the realm of our sensory verification. That's just, we simply have to accept the statements from Shastra. We have no way to prove or disprove them.
Right. That's fair. That's fair.
Like, why is the sky blue? Because that's what Krishna made it. He likes to have a blue sky. He could have made a green sky or a purple sky.
And thank God that we evolved the S1 Opsin gene in order to see that beautiful blue sky. Um, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk. Yeah, I don't mean to cut this conversation short. There's so many other topics that I really do want to discuss with you that you touched on in your work, and Big Bang and the Sages, as well as these videos you posted here on Vedic Chronology. And there's some kind of novel topics also relating to one topic you've touched on a little bit in these videos is quantum mechanics. And I have a big interest in a field of Puranic study called Shankya, which is about the arrangement of material elements. and and I can't help but have just so many questions about how science is, how our material science is catching up to that. So I'd like to have some follow-up discussions on those topics. Uh,
Okay,
but
let's do it.
perfect, perfect. Um, do you have any closing thoughts for this portion of what we talked about today?
I think it was pretty clearly laid out.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Thank you so much for this opportunity to pick your brain a little bit and to maybe expose the audience to some concepts they might not have been familiar with before. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You
Hare
too.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Have a great day.
Thank you.